Okay, now I will tell you that as far as muscles are concerned, this is not a complete list. This handout is, however, both sides. Okay, so please make sure that you memorize both sides of this. Okay, and when I say memorize, you need to know, okay, diaphragm, the origin of the diaphragm is the ventral surface of centra of second to fourth lumbar vertebrae and xiphoid process of sternum. You need to know that. You need to have that memorized, okay? Insertion is the central semilunar tendon. What the heck is that? Doesn't matter. You gotta know it. You gotta memorize it, okay? The action is to depress abdominal viscera and expand thoracic cavity. Okay, you have to know that word for word. You can't just say depress abdomen. Doesn't work that way, okay? So you need to memorize all of these origins, insertions, and actions for all of these muscles, okay? But I've taken a bunch of other stuff off the list and simplified some things because rabbit's a little bit different than the cat is, okay? So we're going to start with the membranes. What's the function of all membranes that I told you to memorize? Cricket, cricket, chirping in the background as I'm getting older, waiting for you guys to give me the answer. Produce fluids to reduce friction. Okay, that's what I told you guys to memorize. Each one of these membranes actually has a different function in addition to that, but in order to simplify, if you put that down as the function for any membrane, if I ask you the function for a membrane, then you're okay. You get the points, okay? So, for example, we're going to start with parietal peritoneum right here. Okay, its main function? Produce fluids to reduce friction. Okay, now each one of these organs has an outermost covering. It's not a separate membrane, it's just the outermost covering of the organ called visceral peritoneum, also known as, do you guys remember that? Serosa, the serosa. Remember, mucosa muscularis, mucosa, submucosa muscularis, and serosa. Okay, so, but for the lab practical, it sounds like you guys all know visceral peritoneum, which is what I want you guys to know. Okay, what's the main function of that? Produce fluids to reduce friction. Okay, so now, attached to the greater curvature of the stomach, and it looks like this group has really removed pretty much all of it. Okay, here's a little bit left of it right here. Some of you will have a membrane that's still attached right here, attached to the greater curvature. Because it's attached to the greater curvature, it is called greater omentum. Okay, and we all know what the function of the greater omentum is. Okay, and then the lesser omentum is attached to the lesser curvature of the stomach. So that is this. If you guys can see this membrane right here. Very, very fragile, very thin. Almost looks like it's an afterthought. Okay? It's like God was saying, I think I probably should put something there maybe. I don't know. All right, so that's called the lesser omentum. All right, the falciform ligament coming from here, this dome-shaped muscle right here, down into the liver. That's called the falciform ligament. Okay, and then the suspensory ligament. Now here's a typical. Okay, here's what's left of it right here. This little glob of fat. Okay. But this is typical of a membrane that does have a different function. Okay, it holds the urinary bladder to the ventral body wall. Okay, but you don't need to know that for this test. For this test, you just need to know that it does what? Produces fluids to reduce friction. Okay. All right, the dorsal mesentery was all covering all of this. Okay, which of course would betray a much different function than producing fluids to reduce friction, but it also produces fluids to reduce friction as well. Okay. And the true mesentery, when I show you that, that's this right here, this membrane here holding the intestines all together and holding the blood vessels and the nerves that work the intestines, okay? But it also produces fluids to reduce friction, okay? So there's our membranes, and there is our function of the membranes, okay? Questions about that? Okay, let's look at the organs. This is called
Liver.
the liver. What is its function? Produce bile. It produces bile, okay? If you have, now there's 100 different things that the liver does, okay? Produce bile is the simplest thing to put down on a test, all right? And then we have our gallbladder underneath here. What does that do? Stores bile, okay?
Your gallbladder?
Gallbladder, stores bile. All right, the stomach, that's this guy right here, okay? Now, you've already learned the 4 regions of the stomach, okay? And that was in chapter 23. I'll refresh your memory. The entrance of the stomach, which is way back in here, is called the cardia. Then we have this dome-shaped part, which is called the fundus. And then we have the body with the rugae in it. Remember the rugae? They're like the fins in the inside of a dryer, okay? And then the end of the stomach is called the pylorus, or the pyloric region, way over here at the end, where the stomach starts to narrow again, okay? So that's just review. That's nothing new. That's just review. But you're seeing it for real. Cardia, fundus, body, pylorus. Okay? And if you just memorize it in order like that, because that's the order from top to bottom, that probably makes it easiest. All right? Now, for small intestine, you guys, I may put a pin in here and I say, I'll put a pin right here and I'll say, you do not have to be specific. What is this? And you would say small intestine. Okay? Now, if I put a pin in right here at the very beginning of the small intestine, and I'll say, be specific, what is this? You would say, duodenum of small intestine. Okay, you have to have both of them in there. Now, but here's what I am doing for you guys, because it really is hard to tell. It's much harder to tell on the rabbit than it is on the cat. I'm taking off jejunum and ileum. All you need to know as far as being specific about the small intestine is the very beginning part of the small intestine, and that's real obvious. It's in this little nook right here between this lobe of the liver and the pylorus of the stomach. We've got the duodenum right here. Okay, and that's just the first part of the small intestine. Okay? And if I put a pin anywhere else in the small intestine, it's just going to be small intestine. I'm not going to have to make you go, okay, the first 50% of it is jejunum, and then the last 50% of it is ileum, and so where does the jejunum end and the ileum start? Who cares? Okay, you guys, if you guys can recognize it, that's fine. Okay, large intestine. Okay, I'm going to be very, very obvious that I want the large intestine. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put a pin right in a piece of poop right here. Okay, and there's only one thing it can be, and that's a large intestine. Okay, now this is not a very large intestine, so make sure you look at other rabbits to make sure you can see. We've got large intestines that have pellets all through here. It almost looks like one big pellet just in little pieces. Okay, so that's the large intestine. Now the cecum, obviously, you're going to have to know both. Here's the contracted cecum, and then of course here's the expanded cecum. Okay, make sure you look on yours and other rabbits to make sure you can identify both, because that is an important feature, of the digestive system of these rabbits. And the cats didn't even hardly have anything. Pancreas. Now here's another difference between the cats and the rabbits. Okay, the pancreas is just this mess in here. Okay, it's just this tissue that's kind of in this mesentery right here. It's not like a solid organ like we would expect, like the liver or the spleen. It's just this tissue that's in this mesentery. Okay, now it's a little bit different in a cat. Okay, but for you guys who haven't seen the cat, this is your pancreas right here. Okay, so you don't need to worry about these lobes of the pancreas. That was all about the cat. Okay, spleen is right here. For those of you searching high and low for the function of the spleen is to mature blood cells. Blood cells are made in the bone marrow, then they go to the spleen to get mature, and then they enter the bloodstream. Okay. All right. Let's see. Urinary bladder. This rabbit has a very, very small urinary bladder. That's it right there. Just that little tiny thing. So make sure you go around looking at urinary bladders on these rabbits, because some of them are huge. Okay. All right. Kidneys. Got a kidney here. Kidney here. Okay. The ureters. We've got one on this side, and then we've got the one on this side. The ureters. Okay. The urethra. We haven't really even studied the urethra. As you look at the bladder, you will notice that it narrows into a tube, and I'm going to choose very carefully. If I put that on the lab practical, I'm going to choose one that you can see, and you can't even see it on this particular rabbit. If we were to dig way down in here, we would see that the urinary bladder narrows down into a tube, and that tube goes down in through here. Okay, that's the urethra. Okay. Adrenal glands I'm taking off. You don't need to know adrenal glands. Uterine horns are right here on this rabbit. Again, I would like you to look at the pregnant one. The pregnant one, they take up all of this. Okay? They look huge. All right? In a normal female that's a mature female, or one that's had babies before, it looks like more intestine right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all of this back. Okay, so you're not going to have to decide, is that uterine horn or is that intestine? Okay, I'm going to move the large intestine aside, and I'm going to make it very, very obvious that those are the uterine horns. Okay, at the end of each uterine horn, and it's really, really hard to tell on this. I think that's it right there. We got a little bean right here. Okay. You see on this side. Yeah, we got a little bean over here too. So those are the ovaries. I want you guys again to look at that rabbit up there, and you'll be able to really see them. Okay. And then the vagina simply is, and a lot of people get very, very confused about this. No politically correct way to say this. Rabbits have a huge vagina, okay, so do cats. All right, the vagina simply is where the two uterine horns come together, and so the vagina is way up here, and then it comes all the way down here. Okay, so even in an immature, so we can see where the uterine horns come together right here. Each side, the uterine horn comes together, so it forms kind of like a Y. Okay, and then the bottom part of the Y, this part of the Y, is the vagina. Okay. All right, semen tubes, penis, scrotum, forget them. Okay. All right, so organs. Any questions? What's the function of the stomach? Break down food. Okay. What's the function of the small intestine? Absorb nutrients. What's the function of the cecum?
To break down
heart to digest plant food. You can also just say it's a fermentation chamber. Fermentation chamber for plant food. Okay. What about the large intestine? What's the function of the large intestine? Absorption of water. Okay. Good. All right. Okay. Now let's take a look at the muscles. Now two of these muscles we just really can't even see. Okay. The rectus abdominis is here. If I have a pin on the outside right in the middle, that's rectus abdominis. If I have a pin on the inside right in the middle, then that's transversus abdominis. Okay. We have external obliques, internal obliques. Okay. So if I'm in the middle, I'm not looking for obliques. If I'm over here, I'm looking for obliques. But if I'm along this middle line right here, then I'm not looking for obliques. Okay. This is rectus abdominis, transversus abdominis, internal obliques, external obliques. Okay. Diaphragm is this muscle up here on top of the liver. That's the diaphragm. Okay. The linea alba, don't worry about it. That's the white line in between the two rectus abdominis muscles. We're not going to worry about that. Xiphi humoralis is right here. Pectoralis profundus right here, pectoralis superficialis descendens right here, pectoralis superficialis transversus right here. Okay? So those are the muscles that you need to know. You also need to know origins, insertions, and actions. Okay? Don't try to claim that I didn't tell you that. All right, blood vessels. Inferior vena cava, abdominal or descending aorta,